Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's event, Protecting Your City Identity on Social, how Deerfield Beach, Florida defends their brand with social media archiving. My name's Morgan Wright. I'm a senior fellow for government technology, and since we're in Florida, I was also the 2012 senior law enforcement advisor for the Republican National Convention, so I see people from St. Pete, Pinellas County, Tampa. So hey to you guys out there. I'm excited to be the moderator today. This is going to be fun. I want to say thank you for joining us. We're in for an informative session. This is an action-packed, information-packed 60 minutes. Now, before we begin, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. We will make a recording of this presentation available within 48 hours. You can use it for your reference. Better than that, pass it along to your colleagues, people who couldn't attend today. And it is interactive. Please, folks, down at the bottom, you'll see a Q&A. Send us your questions anytime. We'll get to those at the end. We're going to reserve 10 to 12 minutes at the end. We'll get to as many questions as we can, but that's the place to put it. And if you want to, you can download a PDF of these slides today. Down at the bottom, you'll see a webinar resources widget. Just click there. Also, if you're going to tweet or put things on LinkedIn or Facebook, just use the hashtag GovTechLive and let people know where you are. Now, at the close of the webinar, one final thing. We ask you guys to complete just a brief survey. Tell us about the presentation. Let us know how we can improve this. We have made changes because of your feedback to offer even longer sessions and doing deeper dives. So it's very important that you fill out that survey for us. We truly appreciate it. Now, at this time, disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any media player issues or any other problems, we have a webcast help guide, or just click help down at the bottom. And Trent from On24, our crack staff, will be glad to help you out. So let's get to the fun part. So joining me today to discuss this very timely topic is Rebecca Medina-Stewart. She is the Director of Public Affairs and Marketing for the City of Deerfield Beach, and Anil Chawla, Founder and Chief Executive Officer for ArchiveSocial. So what we're going to do is I'm going to kick this off real quick. I'll talk about social media by the numbers. Rebecca's going to come on and talk to you about protecting your city identity on social, and then Anil is going to close out with legal aspects of social media use, and then we'll get into our live Q&A. So let's kick this off because this really is, there's only three numbers we need to worry about here. There really truly is just social media by the numbers. So it is 1, 2, 3. So let's go to number one. What's the first thing that you usually always get involved with and is probably the biggest challenge with social media? Folks, it is the First Amendment. You will see, and Anil will give you some great cases about the First Amendment, about if you don't understand what you're doing, you can actually put yourself at risk. Especially when you delete messages or don't do certain things. Can you delete messages? Can you moderate comments? That's what you have to stay tuned and find out about. But Anil will definitely get into that after Rebecca gives us her story, which you guys will see how this builds. So then the second number is when we do surveys every year at the Center for Digital Government, we do a biannual survey. We talk with states and we see what are some of the most important things that you are seeing, or what are some of your most important initiatives. Two things always come up. The first one is transparency. People want to see the operation of government in the light of day. They don't want things hidden. Florida, I can tell you when I was doing work in the federal government and the intelligence community, it probably has one of the most open records law there is. The Sunshine State actually has one of the most open sunshine laws. And so that is a level of transparency you don't see in a lot of other states. So that's very interesting that we're having this in Florida, but transparency is one of the key things. The second one is accountability. You can't hold people accountable until you see what they're doing and make sure that that information is available for the public to see. So transparency and accountability, that's the number two. So what's the third thing? Folks, one of the things we see when anytime a new solution is put in place, I kind of look at this a little bit differently. I say there's three things you got to consider. The first one is, do you have a good policy in place? Have you killed enough trees? Let's not kill trees, but you can make it digital. But have you put things in writing? Think about somebody driving a car. You just don't hand somebody the keys to the car and say, here's your license and go. First thing you do is you sit them down. Here are the rules of the road. Here's the policy. After that, here in this picture, you see training dog. Well, that's the next thing you have to do is you have to provide the right kind of behavior. So what do? You train to get the behavior you want. The policy, the behavior, and the training, and only when you put those things in do you actually get the wicked cool technology. So I know some of these may fly out of Florida. I can neither confirm nor deny. But the F-117 stealth fighter, affectionately called the Frisbee, I guarantee you pilots do not get into that advanced weaponry and technology unless they spend a lot of time in the classroom, a lot of time in the simulator, and then and only then till they get the famous technology. So somebody who should have listened to my advice was this one, Lindsay Lohan. This is her actual post. It says, hello, Facebook. Yes, this is actually Lindsay. Welcome to my Facebook page, as she tweets that out. So let's get into the fun part now. Let me introduce Rebecca. I'm going to read a little bit. We have our first poll, and then I'll finish out her bio. So Rebecca began her career in communications as a broadcast news journalist. Her and I were having some fun here. So let me tease you with that a little bit. As they say in the news business, that's the tease. Here is the question. So what is your opinion on social media as a public record? It is definitely a public record by law. It might be a record, but our activity is not worth retaining. I feel strongly that it is not a public record, or you don't know. So it's definitely a public record. It might be a record, but your activity is not worth retaining. You feel strongly it is not a public record, or you don't know. So let me continue on telling you about Rebecca. Now, she began her as a writer and a producer at multiple news organizations in Dade and Broward County. She left South Florida, went to work for CBS in El Paso, Texas, covering immigration, drug trafficking, and the murders of thousands of women in Ciudad Juarez. She spent a few years covering political corruption at ABC in Memphis, Tennessee, where she finished out her news career as a primetime reporter at ABC in Tampa, Florida. Now, 4 years ago, she did leave the broadcast world and began her work in municipal government at the city of Deerfield Beach in Broward County, Florida. In her time there, she's implemented multiple streams of information and communication to the public, with social media playing a very large role in those processes. Folks, I have to tell you, some of the most compelling stories we see have a very similar background to Rebecca. A lot of folks that came out of the news and media business because they understand the importance of communication. So she is the Director of Public Affairs and Marketing at the City of Deerfield Beach, and when it comes to implementing responsible social media, her message is simple. Just do it. So let's take a look at the results here real quick and see what you folks came up with. Well, definitely we're in Florida because 86% of you say it is definitely a public record by law. Nobody says it's not worth retaining. Nobody says it's not a public record. And 13% of you don't know. Well, I promise you by the end of this presentation you will know. So, Rebecca, as they say in the news business, let me toss to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I appreciate that. I just want to thank ArchiveSocial quickly and Government Technology for this invite. It is truly my honor and my pleasure to be here with all of you today. Real quick, though, let's just jump right into this. As Morgan mentioned, I do have a background in broadcast news, and as a former member of the press, making sure that we are responsible with communications to the public and to the media as a city representative is truly, truly very important to me, very important to this office, and something that I take very seriously. So jumping right in, when I got to the city of Deerfield Beach about 4 years ago, Deerfield Beach was still very much a dinosaur when it came to social media. We had no social media platforms whatsoever. There were only traditional communication processes in place. Facebook was implemented a couple of years ago. I actually convinced upper management of the importance of this, and trust me when I say it took a lot of convincing, but we were actually able to go ahead and do that. Our city attorney was involved in that decision, but we were able to do it. So we launched Facebook a couple of years ago, and once they saw that we were being responsible with that and we could actually handle that through this office, Twitter and Instagram followed about a year later. Now, with all of those social media platforms, also followed a dire need for archiving social media, which, as we know, is also considered is in fact considered a public record. Prior to teaming up, however, with ArchiveSocial, we were doing it. We were actually archiving social records, or social media records, rather, in a very archaic way. What I believe to be archaic now, and that is screen capturing. And I cannot tell you how many public information officers and other communications professionals that I meet who are representatives of their city who actually still are doing this the old-fashioned way. They're screen capturing everything that's posted on social media, and they're filing that away into a record. And I have to say that can get a little hairy, only because if you miss a day or if you have an exceptionally busy day, and for those of us who work in government, many of us are short-staffed, and if you just didn't have the time to get to some of the posts that came up on your social media platforms, then you really are not keeping a responsible record or an accurate record of your social media platforms. So once we implemented all of these platforms, I knew that there was definitely a need for us to find a good way to archive this. And so we did team up with ArchiveSocial not long after all of those platforms were implemented. And with this partnership came what I believe to be not only more protection for the city, but just more responsible records. And if you're, for those of us who work in government and truly believe in public records and making sure that we are being transparent and responsible with these, when we take this really serious, we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that what we are archiving is in fact accurate, is in fact organized, and ArchiveSocial did that for us. So it was protection for the city, but it was also organization of those records for the city. Oh boy. Okay. There we go. There we go. All right. Well, not long after we teamed up with ArchiveSocial, we received our very first public records request, and it actually was a request for information on a post that had gone up. And this was regarding a very, at the time, it was a very heated political issue involving our athletics contract that we had. And so the folks who were making this public records request, they weren't necessarily, you know, the most friendly individuals to our city, and they were really looking for a smoking gun. And I have to tell you, when this public records request came in, I absolutely 100% breathed a sigh of relief, because had this request come in prior to our partnership with ArchiveSocial, I really think that I would have been sweating. We received this public records request, and they were asking for the dates in which this information had been posted, and they were trying to compare the dates against a contract, an athletics contract that we had with a local organization. And I have to tell you that when that came in, it took me a total of 5 minutes to export the information that had been requested, and it was to our benefit not only to get the information out quickly, and in a responsible manner, but it came out exactly the way that it had been posted. It was exported exactly how it had been posted. It had the dates on everything, and so it really truly was very cool to give this air of absolute transparency, that we had nothing to hide. And not only do we have nothing to hide, but we're going to get this information to you not in 2 or 3 days. We're going to give it to you in 20 minutes because it's available to us at the push of a button. You know, we can go ahead and export this information and make sure that it gets into the hands of the public when it's requested. Not long after that, and something that we are actually still in the middle of right now, is a legal issue with our branding. In the last the last year and a half or so, we've been in the middle of a complete rebranding of the city of Deerfield Beach. As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, we have been a very archaic city, so to speak, for a long time, and all of our upper management and is very young and very technically savvy and very forward-thinking. And so we really, truly are at a very exciting time in the growth of this city as we are pushing this city into the next century. We're really pushing this city into technology and really changing a lot of things. And with that change, of course, comes rebranding. And so we've gotten all new logos. In fact, the PowerPoint background is part of that rebranding. We are Deerfield Beach. Even though we are a beach, Deer absolutely once roamed this area. Thus the buck head on our logo. So in addition to the logos, though, we started to rebrand ourselves on social media, and we started to use heavily the acronym DFB, Deerfield Beach. And the acronym became so popular, we started to put it on T-shirts and hats and stickers and giveaways and all kinds of things. It kind of went viral on a local level here, and everyone started to flock over to our pier and buy all of this merchandise up. And anyway, not long after we started to use the acronym and rebrand the city, and absolutely started the process also of legally trademarking our brand on the National Registry, we received a letter from a not local guy, but someone who actually lives in another city nearby, who is known to be a squatter of logos and brands. And it seems as if, or I guess I don't want to assume anything, but just from our experience and our discussions with legal, it seems he kind of caught on to the DFB acronym that we were using and went ahead and registered in the state of Florida to try and steal it as his own trademark to maybe later on try to sell it to the city. Well, because we've already begun the process of registering our brand and our logos and everything else on a national registry, we have been able to prove first use of the acronym on social media. And we were able to do that with a quick search using what we needed to use to go in and find the first use of that hashtag, or actually it wasn't even a hashtag at the time, but we just started branding ourselves as DFB and just using DFB on everything. And we were able to take it back to June of 2014 when we started to do that. And, immediately we've been able to diffuse, or actually I should say disarm, this squatter, this logo and branding squatter, and right now we're still in the process of moving forward, and we're basically going to legally brand this, and we're working with our attorneys to do that. But I have to tell you that being able to go into our system, our ArchiveSocial system, our software, and being able to pull this information up, our lawyers have this in their hands right now, and we're prepared to use it when we need to go ahead and prove our first use. So this has been, we've used this in ways that I didn't expect or anticipate that we would use it, and so it's been a great asset to us. I will say that what ArchiveSocial does for us in all of our social media platforms is it creates, in my opinion anyway, an extra layer of security. If you're going to implement social media in your city, and I believe that every municipality should have social media. Especially as a former member of the press, the more communication that you can get out, you control the messaging on the information that is leaving your city. You control that messaging, and it helps you become a more responsible city in that, if you're the one in control of that message and you're getting that message out to the public through social media, you don't have to worry about news mediums, editing your story a certain way or telling your story a certain way. You can do that on social media, and we not only do we do it on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram with traditional messaging and with information, but we do it with video, we do it with photography, we tell the story, we control our messaging. And I think that in today's society, that's one of the most important and responsible things that you can do as a communications professional for your municipality. I will say that in addition, I mentioned the layers of security. I will say that ArchiveSocial has something called an RMA tool, and that to me has been essentially just a huge time saver for me. What the RMA tool does, it basically is an email alert system that notifies the administrator of any sort of foul language used across all of your social media platforms, or any other vulgar posts or any other keywords that you have set up. If you want if you want to be flagged every time they use the name of your commissioner or mayor on social media, you can set that up too. But basically, it sends you a quick email when these certain keywords or foul language are used on your social media sites, and it goes a step further, and it actually hides it for you. It keeps it. It's still a part of the record. It's still there. The actual post is there, but it's only visible to myself. And the administrator rather of the site. And so that has been a huge help for me, especially because I have a very, very small staff, and Right now I'm in the process of hiring 2 new individuals because we're down 2, and so the fact that I can get this email alert when I need it, whenever anything is mentioned on my social, across all of my social media platforms that shouldn't be, to have that tool is in my opinion, one of the best layers of security that you can get for your social media platforms. So I am a true believer that the RMA just absolutely rocks. And it has been a huge asset and a huge help in the way that we archive social media, but also in the way that we protect the city's message and protect even employees. When you work for a municipality, you often have a lot of political enemies who just want to, they want to go at employees on social media. They want to mention people's names, and when there, a lot of that stuff can get very hairy. And part of our jobs is not just protecting the message of the city and the information and communication streams that we're disseminating to the public, but also, to make sure that we're also watching out for those employees who really didn't want to get caught up in the crosshairs of politics, They didn't sign up for that. They just want to go and do their job in Parks and Recreation or in the Public Affairs office or in the city manager's office, wherever they might work. And so the RMA has been a really successful tool for us, just as ArchiveSocial has been for us. And so, I just want to say that if you haven't yet decided to implement social media in at your municipality, you should absolutely do it. It is an incredible way to really get communication out. Our numbers have climbed on social media, specifically on our Facebook page, really in a ridiculous way in the past year alone. And we're approaching 10,000 followers on Facebook right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of information that we are sending out. And we do have a responsibility to get information out to the public, but we also have a responsibility to the public, to taxpayers, and to the city to do so responsibly. And so, Morgan, I'm going to toss it back to you.
As they say in the news business, right? Hey, real quick, here's a quick test for you. We've had a couple questions come in. What does RMA stand for?
Oh, my goodness. I knew somebody was going to ask me that. And Neil's going to have to answer that.
Well, it's a perfect segue, and then into our next speaker. Say, Rebecca, thanks. Really good. As you guys can see, Rebecca's really great at telling a story, keeping you guys engaged, and Neil is no slouch at that either. He's great at this. So Neil Chawla is the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial. It is the public sector's leading provider of technology to help government agencies archive and manage risk related to social media. Now, before I tell you the rest about it, Neil, let's go to our next poll question here. So the next poll question is, how does your agency currently retain records of social media? You are not retaining your own records and you rely on the networks. That's Twitter. That's the Facebooks of the world. You take manual captures, which is what Rebecca was talking about a little bit earlier, like screenshots, copy and paste. You use a personal backup tool like Backupify, Social Safe, something along those lines. You have an automated solution for archiving, or you are already a happy ArchiveSocial customer. So you're not retaining your records. You take manual captures. You use a personal backup tool. You have an automated solution, or you are already a happy ArchiveSocial customer. So as you guys are voting, as they say, let me tell you a little bit more about ArchiveSocial. They have enabled hundreds of government agencies, such as the City of Orlando, Palm Beach County, and the world's largest law firm, which is the U.S. Department of Justice, maintain records of social media for legal protection and public records requirements. Now, the company was selected for the prestigious Code for America Accelerator in 2013, recognized in 2014 as a cool vendor in government by leading analyst firm Gartner, and honored as a GovTech 100 company earlier this year by Government Technology Magazine. Anil is also co-host of the widely popular, because I've been on there once, GovTech Social podcast. So Anil, let's see what the results came back. So this is interesting. 35% say they don't, even in a state that had 85% of the people say it's definitely a public record, 35% say you don't retain your own records and rely on the networks. 7% of you are doing it the old-fashioned way, the manual capture. 3% of you use a personal backup. 14% of you use an automated solution. And Anil, this has got to make you feel good. 40% of the folks say they are already a happy ArchiveSocial customer. I mean, so with those great results, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm extraordinarily excited about that poll result. We've actually been doing these types of presentations and polling various states, including Florida, over the past 2 to 3 years. And I will say this is the first time that we've seen more folks using automated archiving than those relying on the social network. So kudos to all of you who have already taken action on this issue. And thank you so much to Rebecca for sharing your story. For those of you who are already archiving and have some of these procedures in place today, I know that that you learned some things from Rebecca's story, particularly on how Deerfield dealt with those legal situations. So Rebecca, thank you again for sharing. And I will also say that a lot of what Rebecca said really resonated with me, and I know resonates with the customers that we work with in terms of how to view public information. I congratulate you, Rebecca, on the success that you've had with social media, and I think that's an important foundation for us to remember here, that social media really does matter. It is a very valuable use of taxpayer money today to focus your efforts on social media. So before I get into the legal side of things, which can sound a little scary, I do want to reiterate the importance of social media and why we're talking about this in the first place. I also want to echo Rebecca's thoughts on public information. And the first poll that we ran was quite insightful. It's no surprise that folks in Florida, you know your public records issues quite well, for better or worse, but it's reassuring to see the action that you all have taken. And public information is about disseminating that information day to day, but also protecting it long term. So we will talk about that, and I'll use that question on RMA as a segue, as well as Rebecca's story. So just to answer that question briefly, RMA stands for Risk Management and Analytics. And those of you who are ArchiveSocial customers who are interested in archiving, I will talk a little bit more about that set of capabilities in this presentation. But where I'll take things from Rebecca's presentation, we had two great stories there where Rebecca and her team took proactive action to protect the city prior to legal incidents, and that really paid off. And so I want to share some other case studies to give you some insight into what's happening across the country, and if you have not taken action yet, why it is important to take action on archiving and having the record-keeping procedures in place. Based on that, if I make my case strong enough that there's action to be taken, I'm sure your next question will be, well, how do we do that? How do we do that effectively? As Rebecca has shared, ArchiveSocial does provide an archiving solution. But my real effort here today is to give you a high-level set of guidance on how to approach these issues, how to think about effective archiving in a way that protects your city. As Rebecca said, if you truly care about public information, you want to have that information retained and protected in the best possible manner. So I want to present, again, best practices. And then, of course, we are here to answer your questions and be a resource to you. So again, those of you who are ArchiveSocial customers or who have touched on this topic before, we're here to shed further light, so please do use that Q&A window, and we'll do our best to continue to provide value to you. So with that, I will touch briefly on the public records issue. I know there was a small percentage of folks that answered that first poll that said we don't really know where things stand in terms of social media being a public record. So as you know, Florida has a very strong view on public records, the Sunshine State, and those of you who are not in Florida, you also have a public records law that is important to your state. And what this boils down to is that every state has a records law that lays out what defines public information and what defines a record that must be maintained. Now, this law was written a very long time ago, decades ago, but it was written in a forward-thinking fashion to account for changes in technology and changes in the way that we communicate. I'm sure most of you on the line already archived your email, and so it's no different with social media. In fact, the laws that are out there for every state, including Florida, most of them have language in there that says regardless of physical form, you may be generating a record. And what that really means is that if you have a crime tip, it doesn't matter if that crime tip comes in as a document on paper, an email, or a Twitter direct message. A crime tip is a crime tip, so it really doesn't matter what form it came in, it's the content. And so in states like Florida and others, records bodies and Secretary of State's offices have then interpreted that guidance to really lay out, based on our existing records law, yes, social media is a record, and we should treat it as such. And so you should be able to see on your screen at the moment the guidance from the Attorney General's office in Florida, as an example. Again, every state has guidance. We at ArchiveSocial have consolidated the guidance for every state that we, to the level that we can find. We stay on top of the changes there. And so on our website, you can go to our resources, look at a U.S. map, and click on your state to see the exact guidance currently out there for your state on this being a record. And one thing that's really exciting is that not only are we looking at this at a state and local level, but this issue and this topic of social media being a record really transcends all levels of government. And one piece of news that I hope you've caught is that even at the presidential level, social media, of course, matters, and they are treating it as a critically important record. So as the current administration transitions out on January 20th, this was the first social media president, given the advent of social media in the late 2000s. And the White House is actively involved with preserving the president's social media content per the Presidential Records Act, which is similar to your public records laws, and for the important history that's maintained that communication. And one thing that I'm really excited to share with all of you is that ArchiveSocial is a part of this effort. We've actually been tasked by the White House to assist with this effort. And so stay tuned for this because we'll have more to announce in the start of the year as the presidential administration transitions through. So let's go to a core question that often comes up. And while I was so happy to see many of you have taken record keeping into your own hands, I know that a lot of you are still relying on the social networks, Facebook and Twitter, to have the data. So the 35% of you or so who reported that you're still relying on the networks, that's not an unreasonable thing to do given, as a starting point, given that that's where information is being transacted. You would hope that if you're posting to Facebook, the data would be there. And to some extent it is there, but what we're really concerned about is how long it's going to be there and are you guaranteed to have it when you need it? Because after all, your records requirements, based on the content, require you to retain information for certain periods of time. And one of the most important issues to understand there is that the networks have made no guarantees to protect your information. So as you post information to Facebook day to day, perhaps promoting an event or perhaps related to a wanted suspect, and as citizens respond with questions as they may respond with crime tips, there is nothing in the terms of service of Facebook and Twitter and other sites that guarantees that that information will be retained in accordance with governmental requirements. In fact, if you go to Facebook's page for law enforcement, they say on that page, law enforcement can subpoena Facebook for data, but must do so before it has been deleted. So that's a key concern. There's no guarantee that it'll be there, and it can be deleted. So we at ArchiveSocial decided to study this. In fact, we ran a study in the month of January of this year to understand to what extent is data actually being deleted, because not only can you delete your content, but the citizens can delete what they're saying to you. And of course, again, what the citizens say to you is just as much a record as what you say to them, or could constitute records. So we did the study. We studied 400 different Facebook pages for public sector customers. And in 1 month, we saw nearly 7,800 records deleted from Facebook. Our technology not only archives, but it actually detects those deletions in real time. And to be honest, as an archiving company, we were astounded by this result. Nearly 7,800 deletions, almost 20 per customer. Now, not every customer had encountered a deletion in that month, but 3 out of 4 did. And certain customers actually encountered dozens of deletions. Now, when you talk to those customers, what they'll tell you is probably what your stance is in your agency, which is we don't delete, we hide, we never delete. The reality is that staff members do sometimes delete if you are in a distributed situation, and you may feel like something's a typo, or you know what, it's not worth even hiding it, or we have to change our post, let's just delete it. But more than that, the citizens are commonly and often deleting what they're saying to you. So you really have to think about that. And this information is disappearing, so you do need to get it into your control. So let's talk about the fact that this is a record, by law. The fact that it is disappearing. How does rubber hit the road for you? What is the reality in terms of how you're using social media, and should your agency think about taking action here if you're not today? Well, in order to do that, I want to present a few examples of when social media creates critical records, because not everything you put on social media is a public record, but certainly if you are engaging on social media, you're bound to generate records that must be retained. And the most common situation that we see this happen is an emergency. This year has been, in many ways, a trying year for the country in terms of the mass shootings, the situations involving law enforcement. And there in Florida, perhaps none strikes a chord that more so than the situation in Orlando, and really for the nation, given that this was the worst mass shooting that we've ever experienced. Now, this is a sensitive topic, but there's a reason why I like to bring this up, because in a conversation about social media and government, we need to talk about these situations because this is where social media shines the most. As horrific as the situation was, the use of social media by the Orlando police was truly a silver lining. Nearly immediately as the situation was unfolding, the Orlando police made a very smart judgment call of tweeting out that they will be providing updates over their Twitter account, and then they also encouraged journalists and citizens not to call or email. As you all know, whether it's a small crisis or a big crisis, you can be overwhelmed. And so Orlando did a really good thing here by getting this out and then following through on that promise to transparently communicate. These are incredibly important communications only coming out on a Twitter feed. This is the best way to date to disseminate that information, but you have to protect it. And that's exactly what Orlando did. Now, I want to also highlight that sometimes there are real-world crisis situations, and sometimes there are crisis situations manufactured in the virtual world. In Florida, many of you may be aware of this as well. This actually hit international news where the city of South Daytona dealt with a viral event. So those of you who've had something go viral, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You may not have done anything to generate that viral response, but when it does hit, it can be overwhelming and requires you to communicate frequently, openly with your citizens. And that's exactly what happened with South Daytona when a woman posted a photo of a dog's mouth that was duct taped. The woman was not actually in South Daytona, but she did location tag the city, unfortunately. And the city that does not have a huge population, does not have much in terms of ongoing activity on the social media presence, was hit with a firestorm of nearly 24,000 comments in just a few days. And it started quite negative, where citizens were wondering, what is the city doing about this? How can you let this animal cruelty proceed? And because South Daytona, again, used social media in the best way they could, they communicated transparently, they gave frequent updates, it turned the citizens around on the situation to the point where citizens were really thanking the city at the end of the day for helping locate this woman in a different state. And so again, crisis can hit one way or another, and again, social media is perhaps the most important channel in the heat of a crisis. Now, outside of that, day to day, if your agency is or your department is not specifically involved with public safety and law enforcement, I'm no means suggesting that this is less important to you. In fact, every government agency exists to serve the citizens. And so if you're on social media and you're having a two-way dialogue, then certainly citizen service, customer service is happening in some fashion day to day, week to week. And so here's an example from the Austin Code Department where a citizen reported a sidewalk that had not been taken care of in terms of being mowed, and this department using social media to get clarification and information. So again, this can constitute record in a variety of ways, and I encourage you to think about your own social media presence and how and when you are creating records of value. So social media, certainly by the book, is a public record. If you're on social media, you're generating records. The next question is, how do you deal with public records requests? And of course, Rebecca shared her story of having an archiving solution in place. Now, one question you may have is, well, you know, I can see how this happened to Deerfield Beach, but we've never had a public records request for Facebook or Twitter. I will tell you that most of our customers have not had a request specifically asking for Facebook or Twitter feeds. Many have. It certainly has increased over the years. Here's one such example of an agency receiving one on Twitter. But in conjunction with that, while our customers are not always receiving specific requests for Facebook content and for Twitter content, they're absolutely receiving public records requests in which social media plays into the mix. And so if you look at this box, perhaps this is familiar to you. If you receive a records request for all notifications of the street closure and you've used social media during a winter storm or a hurricane to communicate road closings and issues about parking, then certainly social media would fall under these records requests. So again, think about social media as part of your communication strategy. It's touching probably everything that you do. And so a records request that may or may not name social media can certainly still involve social media from a records production standpoint. So we heard some success stories from Deerfield Beach. I've raised some things to think about. I know often when I present these situations of how what you're doing on social media can constitute records, it does create some concern for folks. But I want to share some additional success stories here, because at the end of the day, this is about the value that social media provides you and your citizens. And by taking proactive measures like archiving and having the right policy and training in place, you can deal with it and move on and ensure that you continue to have the value from social media. So I want to share just a few case studies where we've seen that prove out. Margate, Florida is another example from the state of Florida where the city was moderating. They were enforcing their social media policy because a citizen was continuing to promote their own blog, their own website, and their policy prohibited that kind of commercial solicitation on the Facebook page. And so when the city removed this content, the citizen actually started commenting back saying, hey, you can't do that, this is Florida, there's a records requirement. The city clarified that the city understands that there's a strong public records law and that the city has been keeping records. And the citizen then made a public records request saying, well, I think that I'm being singled out. Show me everything that you've hit or deleted in the last set of months. And so this is a real records request. And again, as Deerfield Beach saw, well, if you have the right procedures in place, as Margate did with an ArchiveSocial archive, they were able to easily produce that request and move on from the situation. San Marcos, Texas, another example. I talked about crisis situations. Texas unfortunately dealt with 2 major floods last year, including the worst flooding the state's ever seen. But a success story as well in terms of social media is that San Marcos, in the heat of the flood, found social media to be the most valuable channel for communicating with citizens, not only telling citizens about the public safety issues, but actually obtaining information from the citizens about what's happening, because the citizens can then crowdsource that information in the heat of the emergency. And so we have a case study here through government technology where San Marcos had that first flood. They had a social media archive in place already. They did receive public records requests, as you always do after emergencies. They were able to deal with that. But what they also did is they used that history in the social media archive to analyze their disaster response. They created a disaster timeline. They looked at the types of topics citizens were interested in. And so they used that social media archive, that history, for multiple reasons. And it really paid off because 6 months later they had a second flood, and they were that much more prepared. So check out that case study if you're interested in how a social media archive can not only help with records requests, but also just help you prepare with a situation that you anticipate may happen again. And then finally, in the corner of the country, the northwest corner, out of Spokane, Washington, one of the questions we often get is, like, we're a town that fortunately doesn't have a lot of major issues. We don't have a lot of crazy things happen. And this was an interesting case study because the city was doing what every agency does on social media. They were promoting local events and activities. And in this situation, they were promoting a local kayaking trip that they frequently promote each year. And unfortunately, a young man fell off the kayak and died of hypothermia. And so the lawsuit for that death actually requested information from the city, including their Facebook posts from a 2-year span about these kayaking trips, the safety precautions, information about when the trips would happen, when they wouldn't. And they requested this information. And so if you check out this case study, something as simple as promoting an event can lead to a legal situation, and social media can be in the mix. And what Spokane talked about in this case study is that in the state of Washington, they have time periods. They have critical time periods that you have to respond to requests within. And if you don't, the agency can be fined. And so it's so important to have the archiving in place to meet that time period. And in fact, even if they didn't have archiving, they may not have been able to respond fully to that request at all. And so something as simple as a promotion of an event or something that you normally do because of your role as government, how important you are in day-to-day functioning of the city, people's lives, can pull you into a legal situation, and you need to think about social media as part of that legal discovery. So those are the situations that I wanted to share with you on top of what we've heard from in terms of Rebecca's own encounters in Deerfield Beach, and again, agencies that took some action proactively, and it really paid off in spades. So how do you do that? As promised, I will provide some high-level guidance as to how to think about social media archiving in a way that protects your agency in the same manner that Deerfield Beach was protected. And ultimately, this boils down to some social media archiving approach and technology as a best practice. Again, we are one of the vendors out there. If you're interested, we can talk about the difference between us and others. But at a high level, today I want to encourage you to take some action and take action now, because this is the kind of thing where you don't need it until you need it. And we've heard time and time again how important it is. So how do you think about archiving? Well, this is what ArchiveSocial did to think about this issue. We actually did this when we started our company and started building our product for government. And we broke it down to 4 key criteria that we encourage you to look at. I'll talk about these in a little more detail here. The first is frequency. Because this data is not in your control, unlike email, unlike files, social media content exists on servers belonging to third parties. It belongs to Facebook, it belongs to Twitter, it belongs to Instagram. And so your IT department is really disadvantaged when it comes to social media. You have to go out and get that data, and that's really why you need some archiving technology. You also want to get it as quickly as possible due to the possibility of data loss. You want to be comprehensive, and I'll talk a little bit more about what this means, but at the end of the day, you need to have more rather than less, because this information is being broadcast in public. In any legal situation, you need to be able to tell your side of the story. Speaking of legal situations, authenticity matters. When ArchiveSocial first entered the market, there were a host of archiving companies out there that were dealing with social media, but they were converting the data, treating it like email, and really really not maintaining the authenticity of that record. And that's unfortunate, because you need, if as we've seen, social media can be just as important in a legal situation as anything else, and that record can be challenged in court. So you have to be able to stand by it and ensure that it can be legal evidence. And finally, context, perhaps the most overlooked. Social media introduces a lot of interesting challenges, because a social media conversation is living and breathing. It has high-resolution imagery, it has videos, people are commenting on it, responding to it, and so you need to be able to recreate that and understand it. So 3 years from now, how do you recreate a Facebook conversation that had 1,000 comments on it and had multimedia and so forth? How do you do that easily so that, and with confidence, so that you minimize the time and effort and risk for your agency? So those are the issues that we looked at. I want to give you a little bit more color on how we think about it and how I would encourage you to think about it, regardless of the archiving approach you take. And so a little bit of clarity on authenticity and being comprehensive. Here's an example of a tweet. We all know that a tweet's 140 characters, but every electronic record has what we call metadata. You've heard a lot about metadata in the political debates. And here's an example with Twitter. Although this tweet's only 126 characters, the true electronic record has more than 2,000 characters of metadata, information about the actual user IDs, the timestamps, the device used, location information, and so forth. And in every state in which electronic records have been challenged in regards to metadata, those states have ruled that metadata is as much a part of the public record as what you see in the content of the record. So you want a solution that gets that metadata, so screenshotting alone will not get you that information. You do need archiving technology. When you do put an archiving approach in place, one thing to remember is that it's not as simple as simply grabbing the data and stuffing it somewhere. The details do matter. And again, social media is a very complex medium. On Facebook, as you know, there are comment threads. And not only can you receive comments from your citizens, but you can respond back to those comments. You can insert multimedia throughout the post. Today you can insert live stream video. And so you want to ensure your archiving technology gets those details, because when it comes to legal, the devil's in the details. And so look for a solution that cares about the details, because it's not good enough just to say you have some of the data. You need to have as much of it as possible, and again, be able to reconstruct it. And that's really where this next point comes in, is look for technology that allows you to not just retrieve data, but really replay what happened. Here's an Instagram comment. So it's not just Facebook, but other networks like Instagram and YouTube and Pinterest. How do you replay in context that conversation so that you have a full understanding of what happened? And I'll close out with a great example on this. We talked about the Margate situation. Again, this is a situation where a citizen issued a records request, wondering why the city was removing their content and whether they were being treated unfairly. Well, here is a screenshot of the actual PDF that we produced from our system. Now, what Margate was able to do was search the archive for all deleted posts. Again, the records request for everything that was deleted. Now, not every single piece of content, not every comment, not every post in those 2 months was deleted. Only certain things were deleted. But we really wouldn't have helped in this situation if all we did was present just the stuff that was deleted. What the citizen needed, what the agency needed, was the full context of what happened. So technology like ours will reconstruct the entire picture of what happened. On the left side, you see the actual PDF pages. What you want to look for in archiving technology around social media is the ability to search for specific things, but then be able to generate a PDF of the whole picture. In this case, we've highlighted what was deleted, but we also give you the full context of the whole conversation around it. And with that, you can hand it off, and it's really not a lot to question there. With this level of clarity, you can really reduce the time and expense on your side and the legal risk. So look for that kind of capability of reconstructing social media content. And then we talked about risk management analytics, RMA, as you remember the acronym, and I appreciate, again, Rebecca's, she's had such a positive experience with that technology. We do think this is important. This is now a set of technology that we offer on top of the archive that actively throughout the day can help you manage risk by alerting you of content that violates your policy, can alert you of things like mentions of your council members and staff members if that's a concern, can alert you of really anything you care about as it's being archived, present that to you in email. In fact, if not only can we alert you of specific content, we can alert you of specific patterns, whether that's someone's sharing a phone number or email address that may be concerning because it's personally identifying, or is the citizen simply asking you a question. So a lot of our customers want to be responsive, and this technology now can not only archive, but alert you of all the things that you care about so that you can manage your risk and be responsive to your citizens. And on top of that, an archive has lots of other value, as we talked about with the flooding situations, being able to analyze it, not only analyzing the topics that people care about, but even to the point of analyzing the emotional response. So we now have technology in this RMA package that allows our customers to highlight the topics that have the strongest emotional response from their citizens so that they can react accordingly. So again, archiving can have lots of benefits, starting with the public records compliance, the legal protection, and then day-to-day risk management, and ultimately just helping your social media strategy end to end. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up here. I've talked a lot about archiving and the importance of having an archive in place. I did want to put this one offer in front of everyone who does not yet have an archiving strategy in place. While of course we have a commercial offering that we would like to work with you on, we understand that sometimes it takes an effort for you in procurement to move through and get archiving in place. And in the interim, day-to-day, there may be a crisis situation. And again, we believe social media is incredibly valuable in a crisis, that you should be able to use it. And so we actually have this pro bono offering that if you have yet to put archiving in place, but you're dealing with a crisis, you're using social media, go to this website, because we at ArchiveSocial will provide pro bono full access to all of our technology to help you get through that crisis. We'll provide 30 days of access to our technology to give you the record keeping you need around that crisis so that you're protected for public records requests, legal situations, and ensure that you're able to use social media in a crisis even if you're not archiving yet. And then of course we'd love to work with you on getting a long-term solution in place, but no obligation. So please do take advantage of this. This is our way of giving back to the public sector and helping out in the time of a crisis situation. And with that, here is my contact information, and I'll hand back to Morgan to address your questions.
Hey, Anil. Great job. Hey, everybody, stay tuned. We've got a few minutes. We promised you that we'd get to Q&A here at the end. If you have any questions, keep dropping those questions in for us within the next 48 hours. We will provide everybody with a link to this recording, so don't worry if you missed a word. If you need RMA defined again, it will be in this recording that you get within the next 48 hours, the link. So, hey, let's get to the questions now. So the first question is for you, Rebecca. I mean, you and I were talking before we came on air, as they say, and you talked about how much your population increases during the winter months. You get people from New York and Canada. And so the question is, now that you're doing this branding, how is the branding and how is the use of social media help you stay in touch with your residents who are seasonal, keep them informed, and what kind of impact is that having, on the city?
Well, it's funny that a lot of our seasonal folks who come in only for the winter months, they really do, and I know that this is nuts to some folks, but they really do consider Deerfield Beach their second home. And so when they are away, they really stay connected to our social media platforms. Just to give you an example, maybe about a year ago, exactly a year ago, we implemented an underwater camera. We put a camera at the bottom of our pier, of our fishing pier, and you can literally see the sharks swim by, you can see the fish. On a real clear day, you can see marine life absolutely come alive down there in front of that camera. I received emails and social media posts from Canada, from Argentina, from up in Tallahassee, from all over the place. A lot of folks who were truly excited about the camera, commented about how they couldn't wait to come back to their second home for the winter so that they could just make it onto the pier, that they were just so excited to get fishing after seeing what was available under the pier. That's just a very small example, but it's a brief example, but we do hear a lot from a lot of our seasonal folks, and we hear a lot from our tourists who just love to visit on occasion. I can't tell you how many folks who do not live in South Florida, who do not live in Deerfield Beach, whom we hear from on a regular basis on social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook specifically, because we really have a huge following on Facebook. And I mentioned a year ago we started Twitter, and that's slowly ticking up as well. But, we're making it happen, and it's just such a fantastic way for us, who we are a coastal community, but we are also a tourism destination. So it's a really fantastic way for us to really keep in touch with a lot of those folks that are here on occasion or here seasonally. It really is. It's our modern day mail.
It truly is, and and we're seeing a big adoption too in the folks who are seniors. There's a lot more adoption of social media. Hey, Anil, this one's for you, and it's actually one you and I've talked about before, and I'm glad to see this question come in again because we talk about the PDF. So this one comes from Brian Picnic, City of Lauderhill, and he's asking about what form does ArchiveSocial provide videos and multimedia formats? For regular posts and pictures, he sees how PDF works, but what about videos? Followed with comments or Facebook Live videos, because this also gets into the other things that you capture like YouTube or some of the other video platforms.
That's right. That's a great question, Brian. And as I put in my presentation, PDF is a best practice, having a platform that generates in PDF because of how universally acceptable it is. But you're right, a video cannot play in a PDF. And so in our system, there's a multitude of ways in which you can access this data. One is that you can go into the system, and you can actually play that video, view that high-resolution photo in our web interface as an administrator. Second is if you're getting the data out, whether it's PDF or HTML or any of the other data formats we support, we allow you to include as an option an export of all that supporting multimedia. So the PDF will come out as you would expect in a PDF, and we actually provide those supporting pictures and videos in an organized format so that when you're looking at that PDF, you can know exactly where to go in that zip file to play the actual video. So we make that as available as possible in those formats. And the point about live video is such a critical one because live video is really taking off. A lot of agencies are seeing so much success with it. And I know a lot of archiving platforms are struggling with live video in terms of Periscope, in terms of Facebook. And so our technology will monitor that live video as it's happening, capture any comments that are coming in, and ensure that as soon as that video is done broadcasting, we pull in that full video so you have that important record.
Okay, and Anil, we're going to go to you then. Rebecca, stay tuned because we're going to follow up with you with a couple questions real quick. So Anil, with public sector agencies, they say they like it. And then the next question usually is how much does this cost? So now that we're archiving all of these things, can you walk through in terms of how ArchiveSocial prices the platform?
Happy to, and ultimately we sell transparency in terms of helping agencies fulfill these open records requirements, and so we are very transparent as a company. In terms of pricing, you can go to our website /pricing, and we have it out there. And at a high level, the way we price our product is that we've designed the pricing to make sense for 80% of cities and counties across the country. We want to make this a discretionary spend, so 80% of cities and counties in the United States will fall under $5,000 annual, which is often discretionary spend. We do have price points below that, and of course we have price points above that. And that's all determined on the level of social media content you're generating each month. We do not have hidden fees, install fees, data fees, history pulling fees or anything like that. There's a fixed cost. We try to make it as simple as possible. And we found that works well for public sector because you're free to add as many Facebook pages, YouTube accounts, and so forth. And we really just care about how much value social media is providing you, and therefore we charge on the value the archive provides. So take a look at that, and our team's happy to answer those questions. In terms of getting started, it is as simple as signing up on a website, but of course our team's happy to work with you as needed.
Yeah, and folks, I would go back to, and really I'm going to put this slide up here real quick too. And I've seen this, folks, I'm government technology, a senior fellow here. I don't work for ArchiveSocial, but I'm telling you, if you have something happen, whether it's a natural disaster or an event, make sure that you're signed up for that right there, because that, trust me, when it comes later and you want to replay those events, you're going to need that information. Hey, so Rebecca, we're going to have you close out and take us to the top of the hour here. So a couple questions for you is, Neil just explained how you went about procuring this. Some things don't require a bid, but how did the city of Deerfield Beach, when you went through your branding, when you started dragging them, as you say, into the modern age with Facebook and Twitter, how did you go about making the business case to get any kind of a solution for doing this? How did you explain the risk? How did you go about the cost? And how did you approach acquiring it?
Wow. Okay. Well, municipalities just don't have a whole lot of money. And we actually, funny enough, we were lucky because of the dollar amount of ArchiveSocial in order to implement that in any city is quite low in comparison to a lot of other software platforms. And because of the pricing, we didn't have to go before commission on this or anything. All we had to do was make it a sole source, and we were able to move forward with that. But in regards to your other question about making the case for why we needed this and why we needed to spend the money on this, quite frankly, I think that is a very easy case to make when you're talking about government and you're talking about providing a stream of communication that has now become it has become our traditional stream of communication. Social media that is our culture. That is how we are communicating today. And if we are expecting to do that responsibly and to protect our messaging, to protect the image of the city, we have to put certain protections in place. And, we protect ourselves in other ways. We have a city attorney who, we pay big fees to sit in on a commission meeting, every other week. But he's there for a purpose. He's there to protect us on certain matters. He's there because he knows municipal law, and it's important to have him there. Well, that isn't any different than having a software platform like ArchiveSocial in place that basically archives the records that can be available to the public at a moment's notice or at a simple request. The public has a right to those records. The public has a right to find out, whether or not, we posted something that we should not have posted prior to a contractual agreement. They have the right to question you on those issues, on any issue for the most part. And so if you understand that is your job, and if you understand that the public does have certain rights, when you fully understand that, then you have to understand the gravity of the information that you're putting out into the public. And so it is serious. For the most part, we put fun stuff up, but more often than not, when we are posting something, we understand that every single post, every single one, whether it involves something in regards to policy or something in regards to our next city-sponsored event, it is all up for criticism in some way.
Right.
And because it is a public record, anyone can point to that and say, no, I want to see this or I want to see that because you shouldn't have put that up, and here's why. Well, you have to be able to, number one, go to that record quickly, because quite frankly, the quicker you can get to that record, the quicker you can squash the issue. And I have learned that in having this software platform in place. And so, we have a responsibility. We have to remain transparent. That is our responsibility and our commitment to the public. And if that is truly our commitment to the public and that is truly what we believe, then we have to back that up, with not only with our words, but with our purses, so to speak. And when it's all said and done, this is taxpayer money. And so, in order for us to be responsible with the information that they are requesting, then it is, in my opinion, taxpayer money well spent.
And that's a good way to close out. And right, it's never the one you think it is. It's always that other one that you didn't see coming. That's why you need to make sure you do these. So, folks, hey, look, want to be respectful. We actually have some more questions here. I'm sorry we can't get to them. We've run a little past, so I want to apologize for that. But as you can see, a lot of engagement, a lot of good question here. So we're going to wrap it up here. I want to say thank you for joining us today. I want to say thank you also to our speakers, Rebecca and Anil, for doing such a great job, and also to our sponsor. We can't put these things on without great partnership, so our great partner is ArchiveSocial in this space. And folks, just remember, within 48 hours, you will get a link to this. Make sure that you share it with your friends. Make sure you fill out the survey at the very end. And we want to thank you guys for spending your time with us. We hope it was time well spent. Stay safe out there, and we look forward to seeing you again soon at another government technology event. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you.